Just started. You see the red light?
Because it doesn't even make a sound. Oh yeah, Gordon's great.
I hope so, Katie.
Yeah.
And I want you to be happy, and I want you to enjoy the rest of your life.
Well, she's
Get
been
something
happy.
out
She's
of it.
got
You worked hard to raise your little family, and you deserve a lot more.
Thank you, Grandma. So I
hope
noticed.
you'll get it. Then.
Thank you. I noticed that you have out there stacks of books that you're reading. Lots of books that you're reading.
Oh yeah, well I got
3 different piles.
Well, I want to tell you, one stack is from Indianapolis, one is from the library here, and the others are the Reader's Digest.
So what have you been reading lately?
I've been reading a book there that starts to tell you about the America and all other countries' early years.
Uh-huh.
How things happened.
visit with John.
They didn't have schools. Well, you know what? They used to sleep on the straw.
Uh-huh.
They didn't have beds. And it goes on to tell you how things revolve. And they got machinery, they got railroads, they got machines, they got all the different things, you know. And it's very interesting. You know what I mean?
As we were driving in from Indianapolis, I realized how much it had changed. And I was telling Gordon how I remember when we used to drive out, was it 106th Street? Or
I wouldn't know Indianapolis, I guess, at all.
You can't recognize it. How did you ever decide to go so far out? Because when you moved out there to Noblesville or Carmel, there was nothing in between Indianapolis and there. Why did you decide to go out there?
When we moved out at 106th Street, it was country. And my sister sis lived at 5400 North Meridian. And if I called her, she called me. It was long distance. Yeah, long distance.
It was a long distance. I remember the telephone. You probably don't remember it, Reed. But it was a wall phone that you had to crank. Do you remember that phone? That telephone you had at the farm?
Yeah.
You had to crank it?
I had one of those. I don't know what happened to it.
I remember. But that was the way you had to make phone calls. And also it was a party line. Do you remember party lines?
Sure.
Yeah. And you had to listen for your own ring.
Like 2 rings or 3 rings.
Yeah, 2 rings or 2 shorts, 1 long or whatever. Yeah.
Well, Grandma, you were talking to Betty about your parents and where they came from? Lithuania and...
My parents came from a little town called Filipovy
Where is that?
in Lithuania.
They both came from the same town?
Huh?
They came from the same town.
No, my father and mother, their family came from Poland. They're Polish. And they traveled for weeks, I guess. I don't know how they traveled in those days, you know. But my mother always talked about Castle Garden. Now, that's where the immigrants came in, the Castle Garden. But, there's a doubt about whether they came in 89 or 90. But they couldn't come later than 90 because there was no castle. In 91, they built Ellis Island. See? So they had to be in America by 1890.
So they were there before Ellis Island, which Ellis Island they've just restored, you know, the new museum and you can go.
But my mother, I don't know how she pronounced it, Castle Garden. Castle Garden.
I'm leaving.
Leaving, is she?
Well, I think she'll come in and say goodbye if she's going to leave. She doesn't like to drive in
She's
the
always
rain.
afraid that she'll be late. But
She doesn't like to drive in the rain and the thunder.
Well.
So anyway, Grandma, that's interesting. So your parents came from Poland.
My father's family came
Your
from...
father's family came from Poland.
And you know why
Where
they
was
were
your father
one
born?
reason they were leaving Poland, they had these two grown boys, and they were at the age when they forced them to go into the army. And they did not treat Jews very good in the army in Poland, see? And so their father and mother wanted to get away from that, although they had 2 daughters too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they started out for America. And like I say, they had to go through Lithuania to get the boat in Germany.
Uh-huh. Now so your mother's family came from Lithuania.
My mother's family came from Lithuania, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So where did your father and your mother meet?
Well, they must have stopped in Lithuania.
Uh-huh.
See, before they went for the boat, after the days, whatever time passed. And my father saw my mother working out in the field. He fell in love with her. And they got married.
What do you think? What kind of work do you think she did out in the field?
Huh?
What kind of work was she doing out in the field?
Oh, planting, digging, I don't know what all they do.
They were farmers.
And a farm. But,
Uh-huh.
my grandfather, my mother's father was a fisherman.
Huh.
See, there was the ocean and the rivers.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the way he made a living.
Uh-huh.
Fishing.
Huh.
He was a fisherman.
So your father met your mother.
In Lithuania.
Uh-huh. And did they get married
And
there?
they got married there.
And then all of the families?
Yeah.
The whole?
No, not the family, just my mother and my father's family. They came together on the boat to
So
come
your
to
mother
America.
came with your father's family.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So she left
And
her
my
family
mother
behind.
never went back to,
never
never
went-
was able to go back to see her
Did
parents.
she ever hear anything from them?
Oh, they kept correspondence. And in fact, my mother brought one of her younger sisters over to America. My Aunt Anna that lived in Chicago, Aunt Victor. And I had an Aunt Sarah that was my father's sister, Aunt Sarah. She must have come to America young enough because she went to school.
Mm-hmm.
The older one was too old to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe didn't want to, I don't know whether.
But your mother's parents stayed in Lithuania.
My mother's
Your mother's
parents,
parents
oh yeah,
stayed
they
there.
remained in Lithuania. And of course, I remember when my mother would get the letters, she'd have to get someone in to read the letters. And because I want to tell you, my mother could understand Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
The Hebrew printing, but the writing she couldn't understand. Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
That's the way it was. Because she had what you call a sitter, sitter like a Bible, and used to read that about the holidays and things like that to us. But she couldn't write a letter, and she couldn't read a letter.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about Grandpa's family?
Huh?
What about Grandpa's family? Where did they come from? Grandpa Valinet, Arthur.
Oh, I don't know. They come somewhere from Russia. I don't know where.
Mm-hmm.
I never did hear much about his background, his father's background.
Where was he born? Where
There.
was he born?
Huh?
Where was he born?
Oh, I don't know. I don't even know where Arthur was born. I think he was born in Indianapolis.
Uh-huh.
But some of them were born, his older, his sisters and his brother were not born in Indianapolis. But Arthur was born in Indianapolis. And he went to the Hebrew school in Indianapolis. He went, at that time, they didn't, most of the Jews, when the Jews came into America,
Yeah.
and they landed in Castle Garden, those people there selected where these people should go. They sent my father and mother to Indianapolis, but they sent his parents to Seymour, Indiana. Isn't that something?
That's strange.
Of course, my mother and father were a couple already,
Yeah.
And,
How far was Seymour from Indianapolis?
well, maybe 100 miles or something like that.
Isn't that strange?
Yeah, maybe a little less now. But it wasn't too awfully far, but it was. And when the Jews came into Indianapolis, especially the Russian Jews and all those others, they were landed on the south side of Indianapolis. That was south of Union Station.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, at that time, there were some educated Jewish people, most of them were German Jews, and they helped these immigrants locate where the place to get to live and everything like that. You know, try to help them. Even had teaching places where you could teach them, you know, a little about America. And I know my mother went to the shul, that's a Russian shul, which was not very far from where they lived. My mother landed the first place she landed, they rented a little house on Eddy Street. Now Eddy Street, it was a little narrow street between Meridian and Capitol Avenue. Eddy Street later became North Illinois Street. That's where they first lived.
I remember in one of those poems that Grandpa wrote, one of those poems, he writes about Eddy Street.
He does?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
For goodness sake.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that Rose and I, and maybe Sis, were born on Eddy Street. But when my father got a little bit more money, and they got a little better off, my mother was very ambitious. They moved over on Capitol Avenue. And my brother, I'm quite sure, was born on Capitol Avenue. My mother always had a Jewish doctor. His name was Dr. Witt. Dr. Witt. He delivered all the children, my mother's children, 6 children.
What did your father do?
I don't remember any of them, but my sister Julie. My sister Julie was born in 1903. And I remember that when I got home from school, the doctor was there, but I didn't, and my mother was there, and they were both together in the bedroom, and I didn't know what it was all about, and they weren't telling me either, you know.
How old were you?
I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And when, after the baby was born, then they told me, you got a little sister. But she's the only one that I remember. I knew.
Because you were old enough then, and she was the baby.
She was the baby.
Yeah.
Now my brother, there was a difference in Sis's age and my brother of 6 years. And my sister Rose, I remember her telling me that my mother had a couple of miscarriages. So that must have been in that 6-year difference, see? Because he was born in 1896. And my sister Ethel was born 1900. But my brother, after he was a year and a half old or 2, and he'd been walking everything, couldn't walk anymore. I think he had polio. But of course at that day, I don't think they recognized it, you know. And I remember walking with my mother and wheeling my brother when he was quite a big boy in the baby carriage because he couldn't walk.
But did he recover eventually? He did recover?
Yeah. Yeah, he grew up to be a young man and got married and had a family. He was good looking.
Where did you meet Grandpa, Arthur? Where did you meet?
I'll tell you about Arthur. Let me see, I have to start in the beginning. The Davises, who were friends of ours, one of their girls, they used to go down to the courthouse downtown because they had a lot of payment. Was skating, roller skating was very popular. And this their Sophie Davis, she met Arthur skating. And one time he gave her a little picture. Well, they used to have those pictures cost about $25. And one day she said to me, Mary, look, I met the nicest Jewish boy skating. Look, here's this picture. And I thought he looked so awful, skinny and pimply and everything. I said, I wouldn't spit on a person like that. Sometimes later, as I was walking to go on Indian Avenue, she came down with Arthur. And she said to me, Mary, I want you to meet my friend Arthur Walnuts. See, his name was Valenets. See, the Russian pronunciation. And she couldn't say it, so she said, this is Arthur Walnuts.
That's great.
All right, I met Arthur Walnuts. Well, anyway, in Indianapolis, every year of Purim, they had a Purim ball. Everybody went to the Purim ball. And we went, Rose and Sis and me, and with a couple of the Davis girls. And they played the music and dancing, see? And I was standing there watching them dance and listening to the music when all of a sudden someone came over and said, "Hello, Mary." It was Arthur. He said, "Do you like to dance?" I said, "I love to dance." So he stood a little while and he said, "Well, let's try." He took one step and I knew darn well he didn't know how to dance. He didn't know how to take a step. And I saw he was embarrassed, so I said to him, "I'll tell you what let's do. Let's go up in the balcony and listen to the music and watch him dance." He said, "That's a good idea." So we went up there and sat and listened to the music and dancing. And then finally he said to me, "Who'd you come with?" I said, "Oh, just our crowd." Usually, at that age, you might come up with a boy, you know. So he said, when I told him that we came that way, he said, "I'm going to walk you home tonight." I said, "How are you going to do that? You brought a girl." He said, "But she's only from the family when my father's living. His mother was dead." He said, "She'll find her way home." And he walked us home. After that, he started calling on the telephone. One time he called, he said, "Mary," he said, "I'm going to come and take you for an ice cream soda." And I loved ice cream sodas. So I said, "All right." So he come and we walked down to Illinois Street and had ice cream soda. So after he took us home that night, he knew where we lived. At that time, we lived at 635 Northwest Street. So then he'd call and he said, "I'm going to come and we'll take a walk. We'll sit in and we had a porch, a swing in the yard, the front yard, double swing, seats here and seats here, and pushed it back and forth on the bottom." Said, "We'll go and take a walk. How would you like to do that?" I said, "It's all right." So we took a walk. We went past the canal, past the ice house, past the tracks, down Illinois Capitol, down all the way down to Ohio Street and back. And then he started to come and sitting in the yard. But every time we took a walk, and I didn't know him very well then, he said, "I'm going to marry you." I never
How
did.
old were you when
I
you
was
met him?
About 20,
And how old was he?
about the same age.
Uh-huh.
So I went with him 2 years before we got married.
Uh-huh.
So every time, I never did answer him, but he'd keep on saying that all the time. "I'm going to marry you. I'm going to marry you." I listened. I didn't say yes, and I didn't say no.
That's great.
So finally, we just got more acquainted and got more friendly. And then he was getting anxious to get married. He said, "Let's get married." I said, "Oh, I can't get married before my older sister gets married. We don't do that." And so he said, "Well, let's elope." I said, "Where are you going to come back to? We got no room in this house, and you don't have a home either." So we started thinking it over. I said, "But my sister Rose is going with Dave Dobrowitz, and I think they're very serious. They'll be getting married soon." And sure enough, they got married in June or July of that year. And they got married in a hall on Vermont and Indiana Avenue, Redmond's Hall. After they got married, we set the date that we were going to get married September the 1st, 1912. And that's when we got married. Very simple marriage in our home, only the immediate family.
So where did you go to live? Where did you decide you would live?
And then, a little bit before when we got kind of serious, Arthur and I started saving a little money. And we had a joint bank account, Arthur and Mary Bernstein, Arthur Valinet. So we had a little money. And when he knew we were going to get married, I didn't know a thing, but he went and rented a place, an apartment. It was on the corner of Alabama and Massachusetts Avenue. So after we got married, we walked to our palace, our one big room.
Had you ever been there?
Huh?
Had you ever seen
I
it?
hadn't seen it, and he bought everything. I hadn't do a thing. I didn't even bring a towel.
Huh.
I didn't know a thing. I don't know how in the world he did it. I often think back now, maybe it was a furnished apartment. I don't know. I never did ask him. But I do know that he was earning $15 a week, working for Dave, my brother Dave Hogan, in the jewelry store.
Now, were they
Every day.
related? How were they related?
Huh?
How is Arthur related to Dave Hogan?
Dave Hogan was married to Arthur's oldest sister.
I see.
Yes.
I see. Okay. So he was working in the jewelry store.
He was working in the jewelry store for $15 a week. And so we were married, and that was it. I never made any complaints. I never saw the apartment. I was satisfied.
So tell me what was there. Was it one big room?
One big room,
Did you
and then there was a little bathroom, and then there was a partition. There was a little kitchen, and then I noticed by the stairway as you come up was a little table and some chairs where we would eat. You know,
How long?
very simple.
How long did you live there?
Oh, I tell you, my sister Rose was very ambitious. She lived in an apartment in a neighborhood which was colored and white, and she was very ambitious. So, you know, she was always looking. I lived in that apartment, I don't know, maybe a year, maybe less. And then we moved to half of a double on Pratt Street off of Fort Wayne Avenue, where his brother Harry and his wife had a half of a double. While I was living there, my sister Rose was looking up farther north. So we were a very close family, even after marriage. So she got together with me and said, Mary, I saw a lovely big apartment on 20th Street, off of Illinois. He said, let's two of us go together and share the apartment. I said, all right. So we did. So we lived that way for a year or two.
How did that work out? Did you get along all right?
Oh, yeah. We got on fine.
Isn't that good?
And then
People still do that. It's a good idea.
And my sister Rose, they decided that they were going to open up a little grocery. And I had to move. So Sis and I rented a little, Bungalow Park was at 16th and Capitol, little bungalows all around a big park. So Sis and I went together.
Was she married by then?
She was married by then. That was 2 years later, see.
So first you lived with Rose, and then you lived with...
And with Sis. And from Sis, I went to the Methodist Hospital, and Irma was born. And where do you suppose I lived? Near my sister Rose, a couple of blocks away on East Washington Street, in a duplex. Well, we lived there for a couple of years. In 1915, we bought our first house.
Well, Mother was born in 1915.
She was born in the Methodist Hospital.
Yeah,
so
in
was Stanley.
You know what? Well, what did your first house cost?
I don't remember, but in those days it was a brand new house. It had just been built, and it was a double. I bet it wasn't over $6,000. But his sister Fan helped him out. She loaned him some money for a down payment. And it was a double, and we rented a half of it, you know. And so Stanley was born while we lived there.
Did you have a car?
I did later, but then we had a car. Well, if you want to call it a car.
What was it?
Arthur was always crazy about a car, so he had a chance. He bought it was just like a platform and a seat. And one day he called, he said, Mother, I bought a car. I'm going to come take you for a ride. So he comes out with that beautiful thing. It was nothing but a platform and a seat. So I got in, and we started to ride down Capitol Avenue. It happened, it must have rained, and it was kind of wet. And he skidded, and I was scared to death. The car started skidding around. And then, when we could afford a little better, we bought a car. And in those days, a car, you had to crank it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could never crank a car. Even men have trouble cranking a car. So I said to my sister, Sis, I said, Sis, and Arthur too, I said, the first time we get a car and I don't have to crank, I'm going to learn how to drive. And I did.
And what kind of car was that?
I don't remember the name of it, but it was a convertible thing. I mean that in a way you could take, the top could be removed, and in the winter that top would come off and be raised up to the ceiling in the garage.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what you paid for the car?
Huh?
Do you remember what you paid for the car?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I was very funny. I never asked Arthur. I never asked him, how much money do you have, or what did you pay for this, or all through my entire life. I was just a follower.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I followed. And I never complained about anything. I never complained. Everything was always all right if he did it. I didn't do any complaining.
So you got along very well.
Oh, yes. Thank God. I want to tell you, towards the very end of Arthur's life, after we moved down to Carmel, 106th Street, Arthur had a slight heart condition,
Mm-hmm.
see. He'd had a couple of other illnesses before that. So one day, so every year about fall, he would get an attack, and the doctor would say, Arthur, you better go into the hospital for a while. And this time he was in the hospital at I think St. Vincent's, Methodist. Anyway, I used to go up every day to see him. So that rainy day I went up and I had a green coat that I wondered why I ever bought it. I hated it so. And I come up there, all rainy and everything, and the time before he was in when he was in the hospital, he said, you know, Mother, I get so lonesome all alone in a room. If I ever have to go back to the hospital, he said, I want to be in with somebody else so I can talk to somebody. He'd come me. And this time he had a double room. So I come up there all rainy and everything, and I take my coat off, and he catches a hold of me and puts his arm around my shoulder and turned me around and said to this man, he said, look at her, isn't she beautiful? I said, beautiful in this mess? That's what he said. I never forget that. There's some things you never forget. And that was one of them.
How old was he then?
Huh?
How old was he then?
50.
Old? He was 50.
He only was 58 years old when he died
Uh-huh.
in 1950.
Mm-hmm. 1950.
1950, he was 58 years old in a couple of months. Too young, too young. And he said, one day we were sitting in the yard opposite each other with a car. He was sitting on one fender, I was on the other. And he starts to talk, and he said, you know, Mother, when I'm gone, he said, I don't think you ought to live out here. He said, it's too big. He said, it's not for you alone. He said, I'll tell you what, Bodner's got an apartment. He said, I'll buy you the apartment. I said, I don't need a whole apartment. I only need one.
He wanted to buy a whole apartment house?
He wanted to buy the whole building. Yeah.
So
Said
he
that
had
so I could live there.
Yeah.
He didn't want me to stay out on the farm.
So he had a premonition. He didn't think he was going to
Yeah,
live
well,
long.
he knew he had high blood pressure and he had this heart condition. The left lung of his heart was badly damaged. And he just sat there casually talking things, just like you talk in common, ordinary conversation.
So did you stay on at the farm? Did you stay at the farm or did you go to the apartment? Right away after he died.
We did not buy the apartment. So I'll tell you what, so I kind of floundered around for 2 or 3 years. I still had that Mary Green that I'd had for years. And I would go in town and stay with my sister Julie for a while, stay with May Sagalowski for a while. Kind of bounced around from one place to the other. Till finally one day I made up my mind, I'm not going to live like this. And it took about 2 or 3 years. And I said, I'm gonna look in the paper and see about a place. And I looked in the paper and this apartment at 3777 North Meridian was for rent. And I said to May Sagalowski, May, I said, I'm going to go and find out about that apartment. And I liked it. And I rented it. It was a nice building. Well,
I remember that. That was the building you moved into,
Yeah.
right? That you stayed in until you came
I
here.
lived there 13 years.
Yeah. That was a nice apartment. Do you remember? What are you doing?
I lived there 13 years.
Uh-huh.
And my sister Julie and Ethel, later, a few years later, moved into the apartment on 38th Street. And I would just walk through the back lot and into their apartment building to be with them.
that's
I
cool.
spent a lot of time with my sister Julie.
Yeah. I remember that.
She was.
I remember that big old black car you had, that Oldsmobile. Do you remember that car you had?
Yeah. And I used to drive. I learned how to drive. Sis drove. Julie drove. Everybody in our family drove a car, but my sister Rose, she never did. She was the only one.
So you saw a lot of Julie when you lived.
Oh yeah, I want to tell you, your mother has some of the most gorgeous jewelry you ever saw. She ought to show it to you. I want you to see it. 2 diamond bracelets, not one but 2, and one real wide. Worth I don't know how many thousands of dollars today. A diamond wristwatch. All kind of necklaces, most of them set with diamonds, and a gorgeous brooch that Arthur got me very late in life. Gorgeous. And on the back of it is printed, and you'll see it someday, Arthur to marry. Printed. He wanted to cover me with jewelry when he was in the jewelry business alone.
So what was it?
I never accepted any. One day I was in the store and a jewelry salesman came in. He had a necklace all diamonds, all the way around. So Arthur said, look, wait a minute, Mary, let me try it on you. So he put it on my neck. I don't know what they were asking for. They were large stones. He said, you want it, Mother? He called me Mother all the time. I said, where'll I go? Where'll I wear it? We didn't belong to any country club or anything. I said, no, I don't want it. and he didn't buy it. But I made a mistake. Should have bought it on account of the investment.
Yeah. So what were Mother and Stanley like as little children? Were they easy, good little children, Mother
Yeah.
and Stanley?
Yeah, well, I tell you, as soon as we could afford it, Arthur got someone to come in and help me. I used to have a little colored girl in the beginning, you know,
Mm.
and then I had a German woman, an older woman. I was very fortunate to be able to have help, and they were good children. I didn't have any trouble with them. Stanley had I had little trouble with him with ear trouble. Had a mastoid.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to take him to the hospital. Arthur nearly bled to death when he had his tonsils taken out.
Arthur did?
He every fall, as soon as it got a little cool, Arthur got a terrible cold.
Mm-hmm.
So the doctor said, I think you ought to take your tonsils out. So we were going to take his tonsils out. We went up to the hospital, Methodist Hospital, and had his tonsils taken out. Well, I was very strange. I stayed there. I wouldn't leave. When I was sitting in the room, all of a sudden he kind of pops up in the chair and the blood just gushes out of his mouth.
Mm.
And boy, I ran out of that room hollering, nurse, nurse, nurse. Fortunately, the surgeon was still up there in the surgery. They took him back upstairs and clamped his throat so it quit bleeding, see?
Mm.
And the same thing happened when Stanley had an operation for gallstones when he was 29 years old. And after I saw what happened to Arthur, I swore that I would never leave anybody of mine after an operation until I knew everything was fine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had a private nurse for Stanley. And she was sitting, I was out in the hall walking around. She was sitting in a chair, but I was curious. I wanted to look in and see if everything went. I walked in the room and I walked over to the bed and pulled the cover over, and I saw the bandage was all bloody. I woke up that nurse, and boy, did she run for help.
Mm-hmm.
That was another case of back to the surgery.
Yeah, wow. Good thing you were so
I
on
swore
your toes.
that I never have anybody in the hospital after an operation without being there
Yeah.
for a long time.
Aren't you lucky you've never had any major surgery?
I never had.
Aren't you lucky?
Yeah, well, yeah,
Aren't you
only
glad?
had the goiter,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
And I didn't have that till 1948.
really.
And I wouldn't have had that, but one day I met this friend of mine. I was going to a butcher shop, and she said, Mary, said, you're such a nice little woman. Why don't you take that goiter out? I didn't realize, but it had grown quite much, you know, maybe just even with the rest of me.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I had two. And when they operated on me, I had two goiters, one in a smaller one and that large goiter. And Arthur was in the hospital, and I said to Arthur, I said, you know what? I said, you're in the hospital, you got some good care. I think I'll go to Mayo's and have my goiter taken out. He wouldn't let me go myself. He got out of that hospital bed and went with me to Mayo's. Yes, he did. And he was so weak he couldn't hardly carry the suitcase. And I felt so terrible, but he would not let me go alone. He was with me. And you know, that operation, they don't put you to sleep.
They just give you a local.
They stick you full of needles all
Yeah.
over, you know. And there was a little curtain across the front of your face, and the nurse in back of you talking to you, asking you, do you have any children? How old are they? What are they? You know, things like that. And then I heard there was a couple of doctors there, and I heard one doctor say, "Isn't that awful?"
Yeah, just what you want to hear. How disgusting. Oh. Well, Reed, maybe we'll stop.
Reed, you should have marked this all down, because this was the story I was going to tell you.
I got it all, Grandma.
She's got it all.
Remember all these
You
things.
remember a lot of things. I think it'd be fun to have Mother come in and talk about with Grandma while we're sort of curious.
And Michael too, you know,
about
asking
the things
questions.
that she
Okay.
remembers about.
We're gonna stop.
Being-
I lay in bed at night, and all these memories come back to me like a big picture. We lived, immigrants were living on the south side. A Union Station was up, and the railroad ran through there. And, of course, I have to tell them, you told me you read about Eddy Street.
Yeah. Well,
That's where I was born. And my sister, my older sister, and my younger sister. After that, my mother and father moved a couple of blocks away. Eddy Street became Illinois Street, North Illinois and South Illinois Street. But Eddy Street was where I was born. It was named that at the time, and our church, our shul, was just a Russian shul, was very short, just a couple of blocks away.
So with your in-laws in who was in Seymour? Where were you born?
Well, you see, when the immigrants came into Castle Garden, the people there that were in charge, at that time, I think, the way I understand, they were distributing them all through the United States and the Midwest
Who
and all.
made those decisions? Who decided?
Huh?
Who decided that some
There
would
was
go there?
authorities there. There were authorities that had charge of it.
Were they?
I don't know who they were, but there
Were
was
they-
the authority.
Do you think they were
sent
government?
my mother and my father and mother to Indianapolis and sent their parents to Seymour, Indiana. Now that you would think was a strange arrangement, but see, they were separate couples. They wanted the people scattered all around, you know. They didn't want them just all in one place.
Was it possible that it was the Jewish community itself that made the decisions?
My parents landed in Castle Garden either in 1889 or 1890. We were never quite sure of the date. However, that couldn't have been later than 1890 because Ellis Island was built in 1891. My father came from Poland and traveled all those miles to Lithuania, which was a long distance around the water, to get a boat in Germany to come to America. One of the reasons that they were anxious to get away, because they had two sons ready to go into the service, Army, and they didn't want their sons to have to go into the service because they were not treated very good. When they got to Lithuania, they had to stay a while, I guess, before the boat came in to take them to America. And my father's folks, somehow or other, might have, for all I know, they might have lived with my mother's folks, you know, and they might have lived in a little village. And I don't know how they did. I have no idea. My mother never did say, except he said that my father met my mother working in the fields. I don't know what she was doing, but they evidently had a field with whatever growing or something. It seemed to me they talked about peat, something that they burn. And he might have been digging that up. You know, she might have been digging that up. She was a young lady, about 20 years, 18 to 20, I don't know. In the meantime, my father fell in love with my mother, and they got married right there in Lithuania. And my mother traveled to America with my father and his folks. He had a brother and two sisters, his mother and father. My mother never did get a chance to go back to see her people. But they kept up a correspondence through all the years. They kept in touch. In fact, many years later, my mother brought a younger sister to America, and her brothers. Well, anyway, when they landed in America, in Palace Castle Garden, they were sent, like I said, to Indianapolis and Seymour. We lived on Eddy Street. Most of the immigrants, especially Jewish immigrants and German, were all settled on the south side of Indianapolis.
What was Indianapolis like in those days? What do you remember
I
about
wouldn't
it?
know as a child. How would I know?
What do you remember when even growing up there?
Well, one thing I remember is the monument.
Downtown.
On the circle, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
did you go around the city on a bus or on a
well,
trolley?
not till many years later, when I was grown up, see. In the younger days, I guess it was, I know my father had a horse and a wagon, and we would go to ride to Seymour, and in that, and they would go to the fair and sell bananas. And my grandfather, I remember my grandfather in Seymour, he handled bananas, and I could still see in this dark room whole bunches of bananas hanging there ripening up, see? Well, anyway, we lived on Eddy Street. I was born there, my sister before me and the one after me. After that, my parents evidently had a little more income, and they moved to a little better neighborhood, street, and house. And, let's see.
Is that on Meridian Street?
Anyway,
No.
my father always worked. I remember that. But you know, children don't ask their parents when you're real young, what you do. Whatever he did, he said to my mother, he said, "Now look, I'm not going to be working for somebody else all my life. I'm going to go into business." In the meantime, he had met a man by the name of Goldstein. So Mr. Goldstein and he decided they would go into business. And they would go into business by buying scrap metal and iron. That's all they were going to handle. So they moved, so it was decided on, and they moved to Bedford, Indiana, to open this little business that they were going to have. And we stayed there a couple of years. I remember Bedford, Indiana very well. We lived in an orchard. The woman that owned the ground where we lived also lived in the slide, and it was an orchard, apple orchard. And right across the street was a man that had a cider machine. And I would go over and watch the apples being washed and put into the washing machine and the cider coming out of it. I remember that. Anyway, let's see, from there, after a couple of years living in Bedford, Indiana, my mother was a very Orthodox Jewish woman, and she wanted to be able to buy her kosher meat and her breads and all the things that she was familiar with. So she told my father, "I don't want to live here any longer. I want to move back to Indianapolis." So we did. Mr. Goldstein was supposed to take charge of the merchandise and sell it in Indianapolis and meet my father and divide up the money, you know. But when we got to Indianapolis, there was no Mr. Goldstein. Mr. Goldstein was gone. We never heard from him again. So my folks had no money to talk of at all. Only thing I remember my mother saying, they brought in a crate of chickens that they'd had. And my mother took them my father must have taken them to the butcher and got a little money for a crate of chickens. And we lived down on the south side for a little while. But my mother told my father after this thing with Goldstein, he said, "Now, no more partners. I'm going to be your partner." And so it was. That's the way it ended up. So my father started looking around for a little place in Indianapolis to go in business, and he found a little building in a lot on the near north side. This was called North Street. We lived in a little bungalow, a couple of doors from where this building was and the lot where my father had the business. And the way they did it is my mother stayed home and cooked dinner, which usually in those days always was at noon. And my father would be at the shop. Then when it was time for my father to eat, my mother would go to the shop and my father would go home and eat his dinner, see? And that's the way they carried on for years. I had an uncle who was very much of a traveler. He'd seen all around and he'd seen a lot of things. He was married to my father's sister. His name was Cohen. Anyway, he convinced my father to build a more modern shop, and we did. And I recall that at that time they had a conveyor on it was a two-story building, and upstairs was a lot like rags, for instance, thrown up there, and this conveyor below was a crate and a machine that that tied it up, and there would be a couple of women sorting out the clothes up and putting it on this conveyor, and it would go down into that.
What kind of business was this?
That was a rag business, scrap business.
And rags too?
And
What did they do with rags?
Huh?
What did they do with rags?
That was right after my father had the little shop, and then we enlarged it. Unfortunately, at that time, we had several fires, and we had complete losses because they would not insure in that kind of a business. And I don't recall exactly the date, but it wasn't much longer than that. My father died in 1906.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother continued to run a little business in back of where our former business was, or it burned down. She ran a little shop. When my father passed away, my mother didn't know. My sister Rose was about 16, I was about 14. And my father had taken out $1,000 life insurance. Now, without my mother even knowing about it. But after he passed away, my mother was notified that there was $1,000 insurance for her. We didn't want to give it to us, very easily, but we got it. My sister Rose was very ambitious. And we, up to that time, we never had a house of our own. We always rented a house. So when we got the $1,000, my sister Rose told my mother that we're going out and look for a house. We're going to buy a house of our own.
Mm-hmm.
So she and I, at that young age, 14 and 16, went looking for a house. Well, we didn't want to be too far away from where my mother had to work. And finally we came on to this house on Northwest Street, 635 Northwest Street. And it was just down the alley to where my mother was, a half a block to where the shop was. It was a very fine house. It was a nice looking house, and it was well built. The man that owned it was a wine man. He handled wines. And this barn in the back of the house was all like padded walls or something, where they had little places where they pushed the wine bottles in, I guess in the summer to keep them cool and things like that.
Mm.
The house was, you walked in a center hall, a beautiful stairway going upstairs, where there were 3 bedrooms upstairs. Downstairs was a parlor, a living room, a dining room, which we never used, and a breakfast room next to the kitchen. A small bedroom off to the side, which became my brother's because he was the only boy in the family. The rest of us had the bedrooms upstairs. Well, we lived there.
What did the house cost? What did you remember? What it cost?
No, I have no idea what.
It cost less than $1,000 though, because that was
Well,
all you
that
had.
was the down payment, and my mother was smart enough to get intelligence that she could get loan. See, but I don't know where she ever learned it, but she did. So she must have got enough money to, after the $1,000, in that day, in 1910 or whatever, $1,000 was a lot of money
Oh, sure.
at that time. Anyway, we grew up there. The only one that was born on the north side that I remember of was my sister Julie. She was the youngest one. And we lived at that time, we lived in a little house right around the corner of where our shop was. I remember the doctor being there, and my mother, I didn't know that she was going to have a baby, you know. What would I know? I was just a young kid. Till after the baby was born, they told me, well, now you got a new sister. And the youngest sister, Julie, was born.
Mm-hmm.
She was born in 1903. My sister Ethel was born in 1900, March the 1st, 1900. I was about 8 years old, and I remember the house had the clapboard. I took a chalk, and I went out there, and I wrote on her, I got a sister born March the 1st, 1900. Ethel. Her name was Ethel.
What was school like? What was your school like? What do you remember about going to school?
If I remember right, my mother started Rose and I in school in Bedford, Indiana. And we would have to walk down the railroad tracks, I don't know just how far. Then when we got back to Indianapolis, we lived in a neighborhood that off on Indiana Avenue, and a lot of the neighbors were colored people. However, on West Street where we lived, there were no colored people. Excepting a couple of years later, across the street from where we lived, Madam Walker bought a house. And you do know about Madam Walker. She was the first colored millionaire in the United States, Madam Walker.
All the hair and beauty products.
She worked for a doctor, and they got a method how to straighten black people's hair. She became a millionaire. I read in a book just recently about her family.
So tell me about your school, what you remember about going to school.
Well, we went to a school that was all white, and a short distance away we had a school for colored because it was rather a mixed neighborhood. But where I went to school, there were no colored children. And we would walk to school, which was maybe 5-6 blocks. My mother would give us a penny when we came home at noon for lunch or dinner or whatever it was. And on the way back to school, we stop at this little grocery store and buy a penny's worth of candy, which they give you a little scoop of candy, or a dill pickle. And I remember walking down to school and chewing on a dill pickle many a day. All we had to do was put my hand in that barrel of pickles and take out a pickle, and it was a penny. Well, I graduated from school in the 8th grade. And my sister had graduated just before. But I never went to high school. In those days, my mother didn't know enough about it or wasn't informed or anything. However, we had in our neighborhood a woman in the Pink family. They were Germans, and she was a social worker. And she talked my mother into sending me to business college. I was 15 years old. I went to business college and took shorthand and typewriting. And she got Mr. Ephraimson, a very famous man at that time in Indianapolis, and they had a department store, the Ephraimson brothers. And Mr. Ephraimson, she hired me And I remember I didn't know very much. 15 years old, how could I know? I didn't have enough education. And I remember when he was dictating to me one time, and he gave me some kind of a long word, and I said to him, Mr. Evenson, how do you spell that? I couldn't spell it, but he was lovely. He took the time to spell that to me and explain it, and said to me, we'll have to use this. And I worked for him in the balcony. The store was called the Star Store. It was a little department store, and the balcony had his office, and there was a little seat and a little typewriter, and I sat there and tried to write and did whatever I could. After a couple of years, I really didn't like sitting there and nodding and knowing enough, So I wanted to be a sales lady. I wanted to sell things. However, I did get a job in a mattress company that manufactured mattresses, and I was the office girl. All I had to do was answer the telephone. And I worked there for a little while, and after that, I got a job as the sales lady. They took me on in the department store, and that was on Alabama and Washington Street, a little store.
Do you remember what they paid you?
$7 a week.
$7. What did you do with the money?
Well, I saved some of it because at that time I was going with Arthur, and we had this little joint bond account. And another thing, I'll tell you, my sister Rose was very ambitious for things. She said to my sister had a job, and she said, now listen, girls, we're going to buy a piano, and you got to give me $1 every week, and Sis will give me $1, and Mother will give me $1, and I'll take that down and make a payment on the piano. And we had a piano, an upright piano. After that, she wanted a parlor set. So we paid out for a little parlor set. Well, you know what a parlor set was? It was a little settee and 2 chairs, upholstered just real flat with a little piece of velvet on it. None of us ever learned how to play a piano. But as it happened, Sis worked at a place that had a friend, her name was Susie Kinder. She was not Jewish, but a very good friend of ours, and she was a wonderful piano player. She was always at our house playing piano. And my sister Rose always gathered a lot of friends, and we'd have all our friends come, and we used the sitting room had the piano. She would play the piano, and us kids, youngsters growing up, we'd get around the piano and either sing or dance. We'd roll up the carpet or dance on the floor.
What did you sing?
Upstairs.
What did you sing? What songs?
All the popular music.
What do you remember as popular?
I don't remember much right offhand. But she would go to the dime store and buy a sheet of music for a dime, see? And it was all popular music. But we always had a nice crowd of kids. They would just drop in, We really did enjoy that.
How did you meet Arthur?
I was telling them yesterday. I'll tell you how I met him. I had a friend that at that time when we were growing up, roller skating was very popular. I never was good at it. I'd get on them and fall down, get on them and fall down, so I didn't skate. But this little friend of ours, our neighbor, would go down to work in the post office downtown, and in Annapolis they had a big cement walk around there, and it was a wonderful place to skate. Well, she met Arthur there, and they got acquainted, and one time she told me that, Mary, look, I met the nice Jewish boy down at the skating rink. She said, look, he gave me his picture. Isn't that beautiful? I looked at it and I said, I wouldn't spit on anybody like that. That's the guy I married. So So the next time I happened to meet them, they were walking down off of Indiana Avenue and West Street, and I was going somewhere, and she was with Arthur. And she said, Mary, I want you to meet Arthur Walnuts. She couldn't say whatever his name was, how to pronounce it, see. And I had met him. Now then, I'll tell you what happened. They had a Purim ball. Purim was a time of happiness. Everybody went to the Purim ball. It was in a place called Thomas and Hall at that year. It was right by the city market. So some of the Davis girls and us, we went to the Purim ball. And they had a big band, orchestra, and a place to dance, and that was the main attraction. So I was standing there. I was standing there listening to the music and watching them dance. And all of a sudden, someone says, "Hello, Mary." I turned around. It was Arthur. I said, "Hello." He said, "Do you like to dance?" I said, "I love to dance." He said, and after a little while, he got enough courage. He said to me, "All right, let's dance." He couldn't take a step. And you know what? I said to him, I didn't want to embarrass him. I said, "Listen, you know what? Let's just go up to the balcony and listen to the music and watch them dance." He said, "A wonderful idea." And that's what we did. After talking for some time, he says to me, "Who did you come with?" I said, "Oh, just our crowd. No one special." He said, "Well, I'm going to walk you home." I said, "How are you going to do that? You brought a little girl up here. You got to take her home. You can't take me home." He said, "Oh, she just is in the family where my father lives. She'll get home. I'm taking you home." So he took me home. And he found out where I lived, see? After that, he would call me up, keep on calling on the telephone. Talking, I don't know how in the world kids find so much to talk about, but we'd talk and talk and talk. And one day he got enough courage to say, "Listen, Mary, I'm going to come up and take you out and we're going to buy an ice cream soda." Well, I loved ice cream sodas, and they were 10 cents, and I never had many 10 cents to spend. So I went with him and had an ice cream soda, and I never will forget what it was. He had chocolate, I had pineapple. Yes, sir. He had and every time I would go with him, he had chocolate. And then after that, he said he'd call, and he said, "Let's go for a walk on a nice summer evening, you know." So we go past the canal, past the ice house, past the tracks, down North Street to Illinois, and we'd walk downtown. All the way down, after a while, he kept saying to me, "I'm going to marry you." And he kept on saying that constantly. I never answered. I never said yes, and I never said no. So finally, when after a year or so, a year and a half or two, it was getting kind of serious. He wanted to get married. He was over 20, see? About 21. So he said to me, "Let's get married." I said, "We can't get married. I can't get married before my older sister gets married. That's the law. I can't get married till she gets married." He said, "Well, let's elope." I said, "Where are you going to come after you elope?" I said, "You can't come to our house. It's full. And your father's just boarding with somebody. Where are you going to live?" Well, he started to think that over, so he said, "Well, we'll wait a while." As it happened, I told him, I think my sister Rose is real serious about this fellow she's going with. His name is Dave Dobrowitz. And sure enough, they were serious. And so that summer, they were married in June or July of 1912. And as soon as they were married, we set the date for when we were going to get married. September the 1st, 1912. We had a very, very simple wedding by a Reformed rabbi. Arthur made all the arrangements. No one was there but the family. His father, his sister, and brother-in-law, and my family. It was so simple, they didn't even serve a piece of wedding cake or a glass of wine, nothing. So my mother did finally say, I've got nice roast chicken if you want to come in and have some chicken. Well, nobody acted like they were hungry. They sat in the front yard on chairs and in the swing. It was a lovely evening. Till finally it was getting dark. And Arthur said, I think we ought to start back to the apartment. So I took my little suitcase that I had bought for $1 somewhere and had my shoes in it and whatever. I still had my dress on. I did have a lovely dress. And I've got it yet.
Do you?
Do you?
Where is it?
In Indianapolis, in my suitcase, and I've got it marked, my wedding dress. I wanted you to have it. It was all white embroidery and was set together with Irish lace. It was pretty, and I had white shoes. I didn't have a veil. I didn't have any of the things you talk about today. So we walked down Indiana Avenue, and I know it was already dark because the lights were all in the stores. Indiana Avenue, all that couple of blocks was all stores. And many Jewish people among it. So we walked to Massachusetts Avenue, with Pennsylvania and Massachusetts Avenue, walked down Massachusetts Avenue to Alabama Street, and just right around the corner was a stairway, went up to the apartment. I had never seen it. I never did a thing about it. Arthur had done everything about it. He had rented it, and I don't know whether it was furnished. If it wasn't, he supplied what little was there. I know it looked awful bare. But you know, somehow or other, when that happened to you, you know you're going to have a changed life, a different way of living. And so I never complained. I never thought anything of it. I knew it was going to be a change in my life, you know. And so we went into that apartment. And we sat around for a while. There was a little table near the entrance with a couple of chairs. And there was, in those days, if you could afford it, you had an ice box where the iceman would come and put a piece of ice in your box. You know, every time you needed ice, you put a card in the window that you needed ice that day.
Yeah.
And
You put a card in the window?
Huh?
You put a card in the window?
Yeah. But for the iceman, he'd have ice, and you'd put it in the window, he'd bring up the ice. This little ice box was near the entrance where there was also a stove, a burner, and a sink, and that was the kitchen. There was a bathroom for which I was very happy, but I want to tell you, we had a lovely home, but all the improvements were on the outside. In those days, people had toilets outside.
Outhouses.
You didn't have many bathrooms in that day.
So you had an indoor bathroom?
No, we did
No.
not. And we took a bath every Saturday night in a great big wash tub in the kitchen. My mother did that. She had a great big wash tub. And all of us, one by one, we'd take a bath in the bathtub.
But in the apartment that you moved to with Grandma,
Oh, yes,
you
it had an apartment.
Uh-huh.
Not only that, it had hot water and heat. See, we didn't even have a furnace in our house. We had a base burner. My mother would warm up bricks at night sometime in the cold weather and wrap a towel around her and put it in the bed so we'd get our feet warm. So I was really happy in a way, you know, because I did have improvements.
What kind of heat was it? What kind of heat did you have in the apartment?
I don't know what kind it was. Must have been a sort of steam heat.
So it was central heat.
Yeah, it was heated, and we had this bathroom with warm water and cold water. Electric lights. Finally, you know, in the houses, at first they burned candles, and then they burned lamps, coal oil lamps. And then they got a little arrangement of mantles, they were called, some kind of gas mantles. I remember that. And then finally electricity. That was through the years.
What was the canal
Well,
that you're talking about?
Huh?
What is the canal? Was there a canal?
Yes,
What was that?
I tell you, that was like, well, it was like a creek, and it ran through there all the way across from, I don't know, just from College Avenue or before there to past Illinois Street, past where the St. Vincent Hospital was finally built. Oh, I forgot to tell one incident when we had our shop. We had a horse and we had a buggy carriage.
Mm-hmm.
And where the St. Vincent Hospital was built a little later, there was what they called in those days a beer garden. A beer garden was a place where people, no women of course, men went, and it was like a park, a lot of tables and chairs outside, and you'd go in there and you'd order beer and pretzels or whatever they had there, and you would drink that. So one night my father said to me, I was about 9 years old, he said, "Come on, Mary, I'm going to take you for a ride in the buggy." So I went with him, and we went to this here parking place, this here beer place, and of course they wouldn't allow any children in or women, so he had to park the horse, and buggy, and I sat out there waiting for him to come out, which he did after a while. And then when we got to go on the way back home, he said to me, "Mary, you'll drive home." I said, "Dad, I don't know how to drive." He said, "You don't have to know. Just take the reins.
Open the window.
Hold the reins." So that's what I
My
did.
lunch is ready, but that's all right.
Of course, you always listen to your father. So he gave me the reins, and that horse, horse was called Nellie, and it was a white horse. You know what? That horse went all the way to where we lived and turned in on the street where we lived by himself. You know that saying, the horse knows the way? It's true.
To carry the sleigh.
That happened to me. Yeah, I thought that was a nice incident to put in.
Uh-huh.
Well, anyway, I was married.
What kind of work was Arthur doing that he could afford an
Arthur
apartment?
was working for $15 a week for his brother-in-law, Dave Hoken, who was married to Arthur's oldest sister. And no matter how little the money was, I was always able to save a little money. Arthur was always generous with it. He would give me everything, and then he'd say, "You better let me have $1 or $2 for my lunches, see?"
What kind of, was
And
it
he
a
would
jewelry
walk
store?
to the store, in the jewelry store. That's where he learned the jewelry trade. After a while, I'd better go on with the other first. Well, we lived in this apartment for a while, and then I lived in his brother was living in the half of a double on Pratt Street off of Fort Wayne Avenue in Indianapolis, and there was a vacancy there, and they told Arthur, "Why don't you move over here?" We did. After we lived there a little while, my sister Rose, who was living in an apartment in a neighborhood that she didn't care for, and she always wanted something better. So she started looking, and she found an apartment about 20th and Capitol. And she said, "Mary, listen, let's double up. We'll take this apartment. It's big enough for both of us, and we'll live there." So we did. And we lived there a couple of years. And then she and Dave decided they were going to open a little fruit store. So I had to find another place to live. And Sis was living where she didn't care too much. So we rented this bungalow. It was called Bungalow Park, 16th and Capitol in Indianapolis. And had a nice little bungalow and a big park. It was a park, really. And we lived there till I was pregnant and was going to have Irma. So the way Betty Thelma tells me, her dad said that her father took me to the Methodist hospital when Irma was born. Arthur must have been working, and Phil must have been home, or whatever it was. So when Irma was born, and when we had to leave, my sister Rose insisted that we move close to her, where she had her little store on East Washington Street. So there was a duplex about 2000 East Washington Street, and we moved into that duplex. We lived there till 1915, and Arthur bought our first house. It was a double house, and it just been built. It was 2900 Park Avenue. And it was just a block away from what I said that creek was, a block away.
Mm-hmm.
My sister, Sis, at that time lived around a couple of blocks around on North New Jersey Street in a half a double.
Why did you call her Irma?
Huh?
Why did you give her the name Irma?
I have no idea. I think I heard it or read it or something, and I thought it was a nice name. And we hadn't picked out any names, and I didn't know. What did I know? I was ignorant, like everybody else is when they first get married and have their first baby. They don't know for sure. Maybe if you have a college education, you might. But I didn't have all that training, I would read books. I always loved to read. Well, after a few years, Arthur decided he was going to go in business for himself. Right across the street from where Dave Hogan had his stores, which was 13 North Illinois Street, was the Claypool Hotel. And in that Claypool Hotel, right in the front was a very small place for a store. So Arthur rented that store, and we had a little money saved up, and he bought a little jewelry and started a jewelry store for himself. And Bob Stoker worked for him. And after a while, Dave Hogan and Bess decided they were going to sell their store and move back to Chicago or Detroit. And they wanted to know if Arthur wanted to buy the store. And Arthur said, yes, he'll buy the store. So he sold the one in the Claypool and took over the one that Dave Hogan had, which was much larger and a better location, and everything, just right off of the corner of Washington and Illinois. And we had that store. But I'll tell you what happened, which is a dirty shame, and I hate to talk about it. After Arthur bought the store, what do you suppose his brother-in-law did? He packed up all the jewelry and took it to his apartment. And Arthur bought an empty store. When Arthur found out, he was not the kind of a person to let things go. He got busy with authority and police, went up to their apartment where they had all that jewelry packed in a trunk. And his sister never did forgive us for it. And we got out the jewelry bag. Now, how do you like a story like that? And one time when I went to, Bess was always wanting me to come to Chicago. They live in Chicago. And one time when I went over there, she threw it up to me about Arthur getting that jewelry. And she talked about her brother so terrible that I started to cry. I cried so much I couldn't stop crying all the way home. They had a chauffeur at that time. They never did drive a car. Always had a chauffeur. He didn't know how to drive a car. And so, you know what I did, don't you? The next day I went home. I wouldn't stay there. I was so hurt. I have never forgotten it to this day. What did I have to do with it? I was not involved in any of it.
Did you ever work in the store? Did you?
No, not in that store, but later on, when we went to the jewelry and loan business on Washington Street and Capitol, and became Lincoln Jewelry and Loan Company, I used to go all the time to the store on weekends, you know. And on holidays, you know what, I used to cook great big dinners and take it down so the salesmen could all stay there. Christmas holidays, you know, wouldn't have to run out to eat. Many a dinner I cooked and took there, and then I always went. And then, in 1936, Social Security came in. You had to have 7 employees before you were allowed to go on Social Security. Well, we had 6. So Arthur made me the 7th employee, and I got $75 a week. And that's the way I run the house, see, and everything. And that's how long I've been on Social Security, Michael, from 1936. That's when it was installed.
Grandma,
Huh?
you used to tell a story about how during the war, Grandpa would keep the store open 24 hours a day.
I didn't get that. What did you say?
During the war, Grandpa would keep the store open 24 hours a day.
Oh, yeah.
For the soldiers.
You
Just
know,
open the door.
he kept that store open night after night because the soldiers were all in Indianapolis. And Arthur said, you got to make hay when the sun shines. And many a night, he and Bob Stoker would go to the Turkish bath and stay all night because they would go so late. And then open up the store in the morning. And of course, he did very well. In 1919, see, we were involved in the First World War.
Right.
And Arthur used to say, if I didn't have a family, I'd volunteer. But in 1918, the war was over. In the meantime, we had bought this house, and in 1919 we sold it because Arthur made a profit. We moved into a half of a double where a friend of the Tavels, who was a very good friend of ours, had an empty half a house. We moved, and at that time it so happened that Arthur was out of business because they were tearing down the building where the store was. And they did rebuild there. And Arthur had first choice to go back into that store, but he didn't take it because the rent was going to be $800 a month, and he didn't see that how he could make $800 a month in a profit, so he did not renew it. So he started looking around for other business and found a couple of places that didn't work out very well. It so happened that somehow or other, he bumped into this Mr. Bremerman, Sr., the builder, and got acquainted with him and built a couple of houses, double houses on Ruckle Street, and also built our first house that we built was at 4400 on Central Avenue. Also built that, which was a double. But the houses on that street at that time, all the way up to where the school was, at 46th Central, were all single homes.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Bremerman said, I'll make the appearance of this house look like it's a single house, and he did. So in either 1921 or 22, we moved out on 4400 on Central Avenue. Phil Sachs followed us everywhere we went. When we moved out at 4400, they bought a single house on the corner of Alabama and 40th Street, which was only a few blocks away from us. And Irma and Stanley went to school, which was at 46th and Central. Irma graduated from there and went to Shortridge, which was not very far away either, down at 34th Street, I think. And then from there she went to Indiana. I don't know whether I told all the different things that went on, but you know, you can't get everything in to thinking of it. That's just a general.
What do you remember about what it was like, what the children were like, what your children were like? What Irma and Stanley were like? What they did? And
oh, well, you know, when Irma got out of college, she got a job. I don't remember, kind of like a social worker, you know. And she always felt so sorry for the people. She wanted to drag out her own clothes to give to some of the people, you know. So she worked there for 2 or 3 years. And then she met Milt. I'll tell you how we met Milt. Knew of him through the Maidenbergs. My mother somehow or other had met Mrs. Maidenberg. I don't know how it happened. And then we had the cottage at the Manitou, and all these Marion boys. But you know, you had a place out there too, and they always came to Lake Manitou, and our girls. There was Betty was old enough, you know, and Irma and Stanley. They got acquainted and they knew each other, and they would. One day, Arthur loved to play golf. One day when the boys were out there, they were going out. They had played golf in the morning. They were going to. Arthur had driven in from Indianapolis. We lived at that time. He had driven in from Indianapolis, and so the boys said they wanted to go and play golf. And, of course, Arthur wanted to go along. And I told him, Arthur, it's so hot, I don't think you ought to go. But he said, if I don't go, I'm going back to Indianapolis. So he went to play golf. Well, you know what happened, don't you? He played golf and carried an umbrella and fell and had a stroke.
How old was he then?
Huh?
How old was he then?
Well, I'll have to think. Let's see. They were married in 39.
So he must have been in his late 40s, huh?
Yeah.
40-something.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'll tell you what happened. He came home, and I happened to have company that night. And he came home, he was all in. So our bedroom toward the front, he didn't want any supper. I wondered why that, because he always had a wonderful appetite. And when it got time, I kept looking in the bedroom, there he was, sprawled all over the bed, all over. Well, I couldn't even find a place to sleep there in the bedroom. And right around the corner, we had this wonderful couch. We did have some beautiful furniture in our cottage. It was all wicker, upholstered wicker. So I went to sleep on the couch. Real early in the morning, all of a sudden I hear a noise, because I'm a light sleeper. And what do you think I saw? Here come Arthur staggering out of the bedroom, this way and that way and this way and that way. He couldn't walk. He was going to the bathroom. And after a little while, I hear him calling me. Mary, Mary, I went back to see what was wrong. He said, Mother, I can't get up. So Stanley was there that weekend. I called Stanley, and he and I helped him up. Took him to the bed, And next day called the doctor. He said he's had a stroke and he'll have to stay in bed till he gets better. So he did. Mary and I had Mary Green at that time, we learned how to change the sheets and everything. Took his food to him. He was in. He did, and he said he saw double.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of his first bad attacks. Just because he wanted to play golf. Well, anyway, it was summertime. The kids had to get back to school. So I talked to the doctor, and I said, how are we going to get Mr. Valinet back to Indianapolis? He said, well, pile the back seat up with pillows and get him down the best you could to the car, which everybody, all the men were there, you know. There was Sis' husband and Phil and Stanley, and they got him down into the car, and we went home. We went back to Indianapolis, and he convalesced for a while, and then was able to go back to the store. I don't recall right this minute whether we were already on Washington Street or not. But Arthur learned the loan business because in this interval when he wasn't in business, he looked around in this corner where Phil Sachs and his brother Max later bought the building in, was a room, and Arthur rented it and learned the loan business a little, because he didn't know anything about loan business. And he had I have to tell you an incident. He had a sign up there, we make a loan on everything or anything. One day a man came in, he said, I'd like to loan him. Arthur said, what have you got to put up? He said, a horse. So Arthur said, yeah, maybe we can make you a loan on a horse. He said, you know, we have to have a place to keep him. We'll have to keep him in the basement. And you'll have to come every day and clean it up and feed him and take care of him, he said. So we never made a loan. Another time, when Arthur was later on back on Washington Street, after some years, a man came in. He said, I want to make a loan. He said, all right, what's your security? He twisted his spirit around and threw off a wooden leg. So Arthur said, well, how do you walk without a leg? So I don't think he made the loan on the leg. But that was just an incident, which I thought was funny.
That's funny.
I bet you're hungry, aren't you?
Your lunch is ready. And we're going to have to start.
I don't want to eat.
You don't? They made you lunch.
She got soup again. I'm so tired of soup.
Maybe there's something different.
And my son Stanley, when he got out of college and got into the store, he started up a business of cameras.
Uh-huh.
We sold cameras galore to all the doctors and big men, you know.
Well, you know, last night in those pictures that we saw of Grandpa, he was always carrying a camera.
Yeah.
And there was some good photography too.
Stanley is the one that started that. He learned it in college. Learned what he knew about it in college, and started that. We not only did that, we sold golf stuff, we sold suitcases, musical instruments of every kind. various business. Look, I am not doing it walking all of a sudden. I have to get started.
You've been sitting a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're doing okay?
I don't know whether I'll make it or not. Sitting isn't good, but I can't do much walking.
Well, it's probably good to walk when you can. I'm going to go move that chair because it's right in my leg.
That chair shouldn't be there in the first place.
Stick it out.
They have to pick it up when the front again.
What's that?
Oh, that was nice. I'm not. Oh, that's in Indianapolis again. They're on Meridian Street there. Yeah, they used to think she was wonderful, didn't they?
Well, that's your father, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't even remember. I can't much remember about it.
Nobody liked those lights.
Michael was so cute, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Michael was just a darling little boy.
He really was. Well, it was
Sweet,
super.
too. Sweet.
I always liked going there.
This is Alvin Country. This is out at Grandma's place in the country. This is out.
Really? Spring Mill Road?
Yeah.
106th Street?
Uh-huh. Let's see, Reed. You were just a baby, so this is 40 years old. My mother is 99. What was she? She was in her late 50s. Huh?
She's about 59 years old.
58, 59.
Yeah.
Did Michael see these the other night?
Yeah.
He say anything?
I'm sure he might. He's making some comments.
I don't think his kids look like him, do you?
I mean, it's
All of those
some
things-
ideal of beauty that's, you know.
Read, all of those things are in the genes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There's a gene from nose and a gene for an ear. And
Yeah.
psychologist out at the VA. There's my mother at our cottage at Manitou.
There's this funny picture of Milt having his hair combed by Film. Look at
Betty.
that. You?
Yeah.
By Betty.
Uh-huh.
Was she flirting with him? Looked like she was.
No. Betty, no. She was just kidding.
He looked like a good-natured man.
He was. I loved him. Charlie Siegel.
This is before you were married, right?
I don't know if I was married or not. Yeah, I don't remember. We thought it was wonderful, but it wasn't anything wonderful at all. That was our boat at Chris Craft.
Nice boat.
My father sure liked cigars.
And cameras.
My
He
fa-
always had price tags on.
Oh yeah, because he was always taking them back. He sold them at the store, you know.
Uh-huh.
My father had, oh, he was so warm and affectionate and nice.
He was.
That's Betty Sachs on the
On the skis?
surfboard.
Uh-huh. On the surfboard.
Fell off. There she goes. Water skis. They had
Who's that little
surfboards.
kid?
Oh, somebody that was visiting up there. Or my fault. He was silly. He was like a big kid himself, you know?
Yeah. Hey, Grandma!
Yeah, then Ruth Resnick. That's Ruth Resnick.
In the middle?
In the middle.
John Cronhouse's mother?
Yeah. There's Grandpa. And there's
Who's in the middle?
Stanley in the middle.
That's Stanley?
In the middle.
Yeah.
We used to sit down there at the edge there, right with the water. And you know that did you know that I went up to the lake about a year ago? I wanted to see the cod. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Oh,
That Betty?
here's Betty and me.
She was very pretty.
Oh, very pretty, I'm telling you. She's beautiful. And father. They're my mother and father. And that car, I don't even know what kind it was.
That's on 3rd Street there, huh?
Yeah?
Trolley tracks in the middle of the street.
Yeah, I have
There's
the
the hill.
vaguest idea what kind of a car that was. What do you think that was?
Pontiac?
Yeah, what it is.
Gordon with me.
He seems to be a little expert.
Oh, really?
Look at your mom. Grandpa's got a camera.
Uh-huh.
Did he speak good English, David?
Yeah. Better than Mom. I couldn't understand her half the time all
Yeah.
my life.
I love you. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
This is you're getting married.
Yeah, well, it was taking pictures before, you know.
This is incredible, Mom.
You've never seen these?
No, I've never seen this.
You haven't?
No. This is like the night before or something?
Yeah, the day before or something. That's Zena and Charlie Bassler. I'm her aunt.
You are.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
This is great.
Shotgun wedding. Look at those false teeth my father has in his mouth. Can you see? He had those false teeth made, Reed. And the first time he met the Maidenbergs, Rose and Dave,
Yeah.
he had those teeth in his mouth, see? Well, I guess Mom Maidenberg didn't say anything, but later she said, I wonder why he never had his teeth fixed. You know? Oh, yes. He tried to scare them with that, with those teeth. My father was a real... And, oh, not only that, he was a practical joker. He was the type that liked to pull chairs out from underneath you and stuff like that, you know? Look
This
at
is
him.
great.
Look at him. Kept doing that over and over and over again. Isn't crazy?
These are great.
I can't believe you've never seen these.
I've
Reed.
never seen these, Mom. Never saw these.